Hello, Kuzu Consult is back at it again. Kuzu Consult is here to bring a tutorial, a presentation on how to develop decentralized applications, web decentralized applications that can work on the browsers. This is a contribution from Kuzu Consult to the Algorand ecosystem. In this presentation, we will learn how to develop a decentralized web application using the C#.NET framework to communicate with the Algorand blockchain to create an online game marketplace where people can buy or sell games on the Algorand blockchain. So a little bit more to this, in an explanation, we're going to develop a web application connecting with the Algorand blockchain where users can register, create an account. While creating the account, they will have their account addresses generated from the Algorand blockchain and their mnemonic keys, which will be used to make transactions. Every user or participant on the application can actually either sell a game or buy a game of his or her own choice. So games can be uploaded by different users and can also be bought by different users. We're using the C#.NET framework, and with that we're going to use a design pattern called the MVC design pattern. MVC stands for Model, Views and Controllers. As we earlier explained in our previous tutorial, a model is a part of the application that handles the business logic, or it is the representation of data. The controllers handle incoming requests, handles user input and interaction, and also executes the application logic. The views is used or responsible for displaying data. Alright, so right here I have my Visual Studio 2019 open. Of course, like I earlier said, we are going to use a C# with the .NET framework to build this application. This is going to be a .NET Core web application. So let's go ahead and create a new project. Alright, so we're seeing a bunch of template options for us to choose from. I'm going to go to all platforms and select the ASP.NET Core web application. Alright, so I'm going to name this Game It Web App. Alright, I can leave it here. The location is fine. My repository. If you want, if you're following along, you can change the location of the application. So let's go ahead and create. Alright, so we have our project template open right here, the web application with the model view controller like we earlier explained. I'm going to choose with authentication, individual user authentication, to handle our authentication, login and logout. So having done this, you can proceed and click on create. This will create the project for us in a short while. Alright, so our project just created successfully. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is to connect our web application to the Algorand ecosystem, or rather to the Algorand network, not ecosystem. So I'm going to right click on the project file, the Game It web application, and add a package manager. So we're going to use the package manager to actually include our Algorand package, which will be used to develop this web application. So navigate to manage NuGet packages. We're going to use the manage NuGet packager to install the necessary packages needed. Right, so go to browse and search for Algorand. Okay, so we have the Algorand package right here. Go ahead and install it. Okay, click on OK and accept. So right here our package is being installed. Alright, let's wait for it to finish installation. Okay, so our package has successfully installed into our application. Alright, so let's go back to our projects and head over to our dependencies to ensure that this was installed successfully. Let's head over to packages and we can see the Algorand package right here and the green downward arrow, meaning it has been installed successfully. We can also go here and then view the installed the packages that have been installed. So having done this, we can go ahead and close and also close this. Let's save what we've done. Alright, so back to our Solution Explorer. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. So inside of our models, we have our account view model, and then we have an application user. Alright, so that is what we're going to be interested in at the moment. Right, so our application user is inheriting from identity user. This is going to be used when registering or creating an account. So I'm going to go ahead and add my additional fields that I want every user registering to have. Because we want our user to have an account address and a mnemonic key attached to it. Alright, so this two is all we need. So let's go back into our controller. Inside of the accounts controller, let's navigate to where the registration function is. Alright, so we have the register function right here. Remember, our application user is inheriting from identity user, which means it has access to whatever fields that is inside of identity user. So when registering, we're going to have a username, we're going to have an email. Okay, so since we just recently added a mnemonic key and an account address, you can go ahead and include those here. But before we do that, let's actually connect our controller to the Algorand network. So I'm going to make an instance of an account. We're going to then add the using statement of the Algorand, the using Algorand statement, because we've installed it into our application so we can have access to it. So you can see the option right here, using Algorand. Let's go ahead and click on it. Alright, so right here we can then do this account address equals account dot address dot to string, and then we'll do the same thing for the mnemonic key equals account dot to mnemonic. Alright, so this is all we need to have for a user to actually register, and the account address will be included together with the registration process, an account address and a mnemonic key. Alright, so once a user successfully registers, his username, email address, account address, and his or her mnemonic key will be added to the database. We're using the MS SQL database, Microsoft SQL. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and create our model. Our model, remember, is a representation of data. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new folder. Since this is a game it web application where people can buy and sell games, let's create a folder that will contain our model. Right, so I'm going to call this game model, and then I'll add a class containing the data that will be needed for user to either buy or sell games on the Algorand network. I'm going to call this game it. Alright, so right here we have our class. The next thing we need to do is to add our model. Remember, our model is a representation of data that handles the logic. Okay, so let's get started. Alright, so we're going to add the necessary fields needed for our game. Our game is going to have an ID representing what the game is all about. That's going to the ID is more like an identifier that will identify which game we're trying to buy. So that is the purpose of us having an ID. Then after that, we're going to have game name. Okay, so let me just go ahead and copy this and paste it. I'll change this. We're also going to have the price. The price can be in decimal, it can be an integer, it can be a boolean value, whichever. It cannot be a boolean value. Boolean value is a true or false, so rather we're dealing with numerics over here, so it can be an integer, it can be a double, it can be a float, it can be a decimal, but let's just use string for this demo purpose. We're also going to have the game owner. And of course, we're going to have the address of the owner of that game. And also game owner mnemonic key. So we'll use this the game owner address and the game owner mnemonic key to actually make transactions. So if an individual actually uploads a game, okay, we should be able to credit or buy that game from the owner. So we're also going to need the owner's address and mnemonic key, or rather the address, so that funds can be transferred to the owner of that game. So after getting this done, let's go ahead and create a controller class for it. So add a new controller, MVC controller with views using entity framework. Entity framework is a framework that actually helps to connect our backend, that's our backend and our database together. It actually makes development easy. So I'm going to go ahead and use the application DB context, that's the application database context, and then go ahead and click on add. To do this, ensure you have internet connection, because it's actually going to install the packages needed for this controller class to be generated for us. Now this should take a few moments. Okay, we're almost done here. We have the entity framework core tools being installed. Alright, so our dependency injection has been installed. Our project is building. I believe everything successfully. Alright, this is taking a while because this is the first time we're actually building the project. So this is not just going to create a controller, it's going to create a controller. That is why it's taking this long, and coupled with the fact that we're just running it for the first time. Now the whole building and creating a controller, scaffolding a controller while generating the code. So this is a one-time thing that will actually take this long. The first time you run it is going to take it can take this long. Before then, if you decide to create other controllers, that will be done in just a few seconds. Alright, so our game it controller has just created and was created successfully without any problem. So we have the index, we have the details, we have the create, we have the edit, and also the delete. Alright, so this controller is actually what handles the whole configurations, the whole connection with our Algorand, and how people can actually buy a game or buy a certain product. So we're going to get started right now. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to add the necessary using statements so that we won't have any errors or bugs stopping our application from building, working, or actually running. So I have a notepad right here with the necessary using statements. I just copy them and paste it here to avoid writing from scratch to take time or waste time. Right, so hopefully this should work fine. Everything, the Algorand API, the Algorand model, the clients, Algorand account, and then using Algorand itself. So right under after our boolean, as if the game exists, we're going to create a method. Remember, we're using C# is an object-oriented language, so everything is class, everything is method. Is an object-oriented OOP, so we're going to be dealing with class, methods, class and methods, all true. Our pages are methods, every single thing. So I also have the whole method for buy it. So this is the method that is actually going to handle the whole payments process, where users can actually pay for what they want. Right, so I've copied it. I'm going to go ahead and paste it right under the private boolean that checks if the game exists. Okay, so I'm going to change the database context is actually game it. and then do the same for this game it. So we have two errors actually. This red dot we are seeing here are errors. That's where this user manager is and where this other user manager is. So let's go ahead and add the necessary things needed to avoid the error. We're going to add a private read-only field as user manager. Application user and then an underscore of user manager. Right, so let's add the necessary references needed. Let's do for this and then for this. Remember, application user was what we actually used to add the additional things we needed when registering. That's the account address and mnemonic key. So that is what we're going to use it for in this situation. Okay, so everything should work fine. Okay, so our mnemonic is actually a 1N, and then for account address, okay, yeah, I had a typo. It's supposed to be double S. So let's go into application user and correct that. So we should have an error here, yes. So by the time we add the second S under the address, our error should go. And we also have an error in our account controller also because of the additional S. Let's fix that up and then head back here. So I'm going to explain this. This is actually a method, a method that is going to generate a page for us. The name of the method is by it, and it's carrying a parameter, an ID. Remember I said earlier from our class here, we're going to actually identify the game. The ID is an identifier we'll use to identify which game we want to buy in particular. If we want to buy this game or that game, you must be able to identify game 1 from game 2. So the ID is going to serve as identifier. So every game we create is going to have an ID, okay, as an identifier. So if we want to buy game 1, the ID will identify, okay, yes, this is game 1 we want to buy, and then based off what the ID is, we can use it to buy that game. So there is a check over here. If the ID is null, that means if we enter a wrong ID or the ID does not exist, as if it's null, it's going to return a not found error page for us. So right here we have a variable GameIt model. Our method is synchronous. That is why we have our await method over here. Our context right here is our database context, which was added at the top right here. This application DB context is from our database context. Okay, so yes, another N. All right, that has been fixed. So back to what I was explaining. Alright, we have a GameIt and then context. So this context is having access to our database, and inside of our database we have a GameIt table. Let me quickly show that to us. Let's head over to data and application DB context, which we can see our GameIt over here, our public DB sets, and then the path where the model is, and then our GameIt. So that is where our GameIt is coming from. So context.GameIt, because it's from our database, single or default, is going to get a single game, or by default the game that we actually want to buy. So it's going to get that game singularly or by default. All right, and then we have some parameters over here using the lambda expression to actually get the game from its ID. So that's what we have, ID over here. So if the ID of the game is equal to the ID of the game we want to buy, then everything should work fine. And then we also have a user it. Is also asynchronous, so we're using the await for user manager. Okay, we're going to use this this find by name async. That's a particular user that wants to buy a certain game now has to be registered or has to be logged in. Okay, so we're going to get the user from his name, from his or her name, from the user's name. That's why we have user.identity.name. Okay, that's the current user in session. We're going to get the user from his or her name. All right, so user it now has access to everything that's the particular user that's currently logged in contains or has. Right, so this is an instance we're making of our Algorand API connected to our Algorand network. Right, our Algorand API instance is a new object of our Algorand API, which means it has access to every single thing that is inside of our Algorand API. Alright, so this is a method carrying parameters. This Algorand API, okay, let's hover over it and see what it's all about. So we have a string, a base path, and a string API token. Okay, so this is actually connected to the testnet. Remember, this is a test application for a demo. All right, so we're not running it live on mainnet. This is for testnet. Right, that's why we have this testnet link over here using their API. And then like we saw over here, we have a an API token. This is the API token we're going to use. This can be gotten from their website. You can generate it from there. And then we have an instance again of our account. All right, that's the Algorand and the Algorand network. So our account now is going to have a mnemonic key. That means, okay, who are we trying to deduct this certain amount of money from to buy a certain game? Okay, so that is why we have the mnemonic key right here. So the buyer address now, as the person trying to buy this buy a particular game, since user it, because the person trying to buy a certain game has to be logged in or registered, okay, to actually have an account details. That's an account name or an email or the mnemonic key or the address, account address. So that's why our user it, that is why we actually used our user it right here, so that we'll be able to pass in the buyer address into the account address. Alright, so that is what we have over here. Then the seller address is the person who created this game. That's the game owner address now, because the game it model, remember our game it model is going to find a particular game that the user or someone wants to buy from the ID. So the game is going to be determined or fetched based on the ID of the game. So that is why we have our game it model, and our game it model has access to everything that is inside of our game it class. So to proceed, game it model dot game address owner, so we're passing that parameter there, and then we have an account info. Okay, because we instantiated, remember I said our Algorand API instance has access to every single thing that is inside of our Algorand API. So that means our Algorand API instance can have access to our account information. That's the account information of the buyer, or the person trying to buy a certain game. Okay, so after that we're going to pass in the address, okay, of the person trying to buy the game. So we're going to fetch the account information of the buyer address. So we're going to get the account information of a certain individual based on the address of the person. So we can see a short information about how the account information works. We have a string and an address being passed. So that is what we have here, the buyer address dot string. Okay, so this console.writeLine will actually print out what the account balance is, but we're not going to use this particular one. Then we have an account before this Algorand API instance, account information dot buyer address to string, what we just explained, and then the before. Okay, this is what the account balance was before the game was bought, or before a certain game was bought. So we also have a console.writeLine that will print out those details for us. Alright, so this is a try and catch exception. If you have any error, it's going to show us an exception error. Alright, so we have a transaction params. It's still connected to the Algorand network. We've made it null at the moment, so we're not passing in any data right here, but we're going to make use of it down down below where the code is. So we have an amount. Definitely we have to have an amount of how much you are paying for a certain game. Okay, so this utils is an Algorand field, a property that has access to algos, to micro algos. Remember, it is in testnet, so we're dealing with micro algos, not algos itself, micro algos. So it's going to convert, because our price or amount is an integer. Sorry, our price, is a string, right? And then right here we can see we're supposed to pass in a double. So we could have just made this this price over here double, and then we can just pass it directly, but because it is a string, so we have to convert that string to a double. That means we're converting it back to a number and then passing it the game.price. So if you create a game, you put the price, and then we have the price that you're going to pay, or a certain user is going to pay. Now we have a variable tx. This is responsible for this. Tx is, in short, it means transaction in short. So we still have our utils.getPayment transactions. All right, so let's hover over the get payment transaction and see what it's all about. This is what it's going to actually this is the initial method that will handle the whole transfer process of algos. Okay, so definitely we are going to have an address from this represents the person trying to pay, okay, and then address 2, this means the person who is getting paid, okay. Then we have an unsigned long integer, an unsigned long variable, ulong, with the amounts over here. And then we have a string message, that means the message that is going to be attached as we buy the game, okay. So that is what we have over here, a new address, and then the buyer address, that's the address from, that's the person buying, and then the address 2. Now this address is going to come from the game it, because we have to enter into a game to actually purchase that game. So the game it, remember our game it is from the game we're trying to buy. So, and the game we're trying to buy must have an address owner, so that is why we have game.address owner over here. And then we have the amount, okay. So whatever we put at the amount, remember we're dealing with micro algos, so if you put 1 over here, we could just manually put 1 over here and everything will work fine. That means in essence this is equal to, I think, 1000 micro algos. I think this one is not just 1 algos, I think 1000 micro algos, or 10,000 micro algos. I'm not sure, I can't recall correctly, but we're going to still maintain the initial price of whoever is trying to sell his or her game. So the person is going to manually put his price of his or her game by themselves, and then a message description, a pay message, and then a transfer params. Remember, we didn't make use of it, so that is what we're doing over here. We're now going to make use of the transaction params as transaction parameters. All right, so and then we have another variable over here, var for signed transaction. Okay, so our src right here, let's go up. Remember, src is instantiating our account, which means it has access to everything that is inside of our account. So our src.get transaction, get the signed transaction. Okay, so we're going to get the signed transaction from the transaction itself that was made, or like a transaction detail. All right, so having done that, we're going to have a try and catch exception error. In case anything goes wrong, we will know what happened. All right, so we have an ids, more like an id representing the transaction details. Okay, so utils.submit transaction, passing in our Algorand API instance, and then the signed transaction over here. All right, so this will actually submit the transaction into the Algorand network, and after that we're going to display a message displaying successfully sent transaction with ID, and then passing in the transaction.id. So this is a viewback.send, so we're going to pass this viewback to our front end or into our UI. So there's a wait transaction that is actually going to wait and then see if the transaction was completed or not. It's actually going to wait for the transaction to complete. So we're going to have also a catch exception that will catch any errors we have and then display the error back for us using this e.message, because we're dealing with an API over here. So we're going to use the e.message. So when everything is done, we're going to have a viewback.success message saying you have successfully arrived at the end of this test. Alright, so once we reach this stage, our transaction was either done, that means we have completed the whole process. If our transaction was failed, if our transaction failed, fine. If our transaction passed and the user was paid, fine. That means we have reached the end of the whole transaction process. So I'll buy it. I actually have the same thing right here, the same thing that was up here, and then I'm passing in the same thing down. Okay, so this is what is going to actually because the moment you click on the page, or the moment you click on the buy it page, is going to automatically buy. So this is the one we need. Okay, we can delete this other one down here, and nothing would happen to our codes or our transaction. Everything will work fine. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave it. Okay, you can delete it if you want. So having done this, let's go into our views, or let's create a view for our buy it. Alright, so I'm going to navigate into the views over here, and then inside of games it, we have the create, delete, details, edit, and the index. So I'm going to go ahead and copy from the create, or details rather, or I can use anyone. Let me just use the create. I can copy from it and then actually paste it. So I'm going to have to create. This one is a copy. I'm going to rename this to buy it, which is what we have from our controller. Okay, so we have the buy it. So now we can right click inside of our buy it, and then navigate into the buy it, go to the view. That's the view of the buy it page. So once we do that, because we've already added the view, it should take us there successfully. Yep, so we have the page up and running. So let's go ahead and edit this page, because we just recently added it. We copied it from the create and then added it. So it's going to have its own separate HTML codes or lines of codes. So we don't need this. We don't need all this. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Alright, so right inside of the view data title, this represents the title of what the page will be. I'm going to change this from create to buy. Okay, and then I'm going to pass in the necessary the view bags that were inside of our controller. Alright, so all these view bags will then be passed into our views to display the data. I've actually copied it. I'm going to put it here. So once the page is loaded, it's going to show us the details of the transaction. Okay, and then alright, so I believe everything is configured successfully. Then okay, after doing that, we might want to ensure or make sure that our account was actually debited, or algos or micro algos was actually debited from our account. So we're going to go into our about inside of the home. Before we do that, let's go into the layout and reconfigure the arrangement. We don't need a contact. Remember, this is a template that was automatically generated for us. Okay, so we just need the home and about. In fact, we don't even need the home, we just need an about, I believe. Let me just leave the home. Alright, then let's go into the home controllers. Instead of our about page, we are going to then pass in the user account details, where user can actually check his account details, which is what I have over here. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Right, so don't worry, I'm going to explain what this is all about one by one. So we're going to need the Algorand API. Let's go ahead and include these using statements. All right, so I'm going to make this asynchronous because of the await keyword. Alright, so I'm going to make the page async and then pass in the task. Alright, so remaining our user manager. So let's go ahead and add the private field, private read only user manager. And then we have our application user. And then a user manager, just like we did earlier on the controller. Alright, so let's import the necessary using statements. Alright, and then become controller. Right, so from this, that means our home controller has access to what our application user has. And then user it, remember our mnemonic key had 1M, so we're going to change that. Alright, so let me explain what we've done. Remember previously in the other controller we had this. We're going to get the user in session. We're going to get his or her account's details through the user's name. Alright, and then we have our Algorand API instance over here, passing in the base path and the API token that was generated. And then we have an instance of an account. Again, we're going to get the mnemonic key of the user. Alright, so we don't necessarily need this by address. Okay, so let me go ahead and comment that out. Okay, it seems yes, we actually need it. Yeah, we actually need it to get the account information. Alright, so we have our buyer address coming from the current user from our user 8. Okay, that's the account address of the user, and then the account info using the Algorand API instance that we used. We're going to get the account information of the buyer. That's the buyer address over here, .toString, and then the view data that will actually view the account balance from the account info.amount is going to show us or display the amount we have currently, and then an act, that's for account information, the buyer address .toString, and then the amount that was there before the transaction. And then we have a view data address, and then with the user 8.account address, we're going to get the account address of the user. This and this also included. So having done this, we can proceed to actually test our application. Remember, we have not actually funded our account or Algorand account yet. So we're going to go to the about section and see what our account's address is first before we can then proceed to fund the account. So let's go ahead and debug and start our application without debugging. Okay, so our project is building. It's going to build first before running on our browser. Right, so this is just a brief demo, a presentation on how to make a transaction on a web application, decentralized application, using the Algorand blockchain with the .NET framework. So we haven't done anything with the UI or the user interface of how the application will look. We just created the application from scratch. If you want, you can customize how everything will look like to your taste. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and select. I think our application has actually been deployed. Yes, it has. So I'm waiting for the browser to open up. While we wait, I'm going to set this as a startup project to ensure, more like a double check. So to use this application, I consider this an intermediate web application. You should have a little bit of familiarity with how the MVC and .NET works to be able to pull this through and understand how everything works. So our browser has opened successfully. Alright, so our web application is up and running. So we're going to go ahead and register. Okay, so I'm going to use kuzuconsult@gmail.com. Go ahead and put the password. Then okay. Alright, so let's apply the migrations. And then refresh our web page. Okay, let's head back to application and then apply migrations from here. So head over to package manager console to do that. Alright, so let's go ahead and add the migration. I'm going to call this init for initial migration. Okay, so our migration is still being added. Let's wait a little bit for it to add successfully. So after adding the migration, we're going to update the database. Alright, so our migration was added successfully. Let's then proceed to update the database. So this is going to add every single thing that's inside of our database. Game it model, the user authentication, as login, registration, logout, all the details that a user needs to create an account. Every single thing will be updated. That is what is happening over here. Alright, so our migration was done and successful. So let's head back to our index, the index view of our game it. This index view right here, and then let's go ahead and include the game, the buy game. That's the buy it. So it's going to be buy it. That's our buy it page over here, and then I'm going to call this buy game. So once we click on this, the game is going to be bought. So I haven't done this. Let's go back to our layout page and add, let's make the buy its controller as the initial controller to be started when the project starts. So game it is the name of the folder of our views, right? So game it. So I'm also going to go to the startup project, the startup class over here, and set the default page to be game it. Alright, like this. So having done this, let's go ahead and start our application again without debugging. So I'm going to close this one. Alright, so this is the game it that we just made as a startup game. So let's go to the create new. We're not done though. We're not done. Before we do this, this is how the look would look like. This is how the view will look like. So before we do anything further, let's head back to our game its controller where the create is. Alright, so right here, let's go to where the create function is. I'm going to remove this bind. I don't really need it. You can leave it though. I don't need it there. So game it dot game address owner. I'm then going to pass in the what I need, and then game it dot game mnemonic key as the mnemonic key of the game owner. Right, so having done this, I'm going to head over to where our user it was when we created it below. Alright, so right here I'm going to copy this out and then head back to our create, and then I'm going to have this. So remember, our user it has access to the details of the current user being logged in. So I'm going to go ahead and pass in this. I'm going to say user it dot account address, and then user it dot mnemonic key of the user currently in session. So let's go ahead and run the application again. So this time go to the create, so we don't have to manually put the address owner the mnemonic key. Okay, yep. So the game owner included, we don't want to manually put that ourselves. Let it come from the back end itself. Alright, so let's do game it dot game owner equals user dot identity dot name. Okay, So with this done, we can finally run our application. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new game. So we're just going to put the game name and the price. Alright, so I think I forgot to remove the game owner field also. The game owner field, we don't need it. It's going to come from the back end, that's from our controller directly. So let's refresh. Alright, so let's input the game name. Let's say Need for Speed, and then price. I'm going to make this 3. So this is like 3,000 micro algos, or 30,000 micro algos rather. Yes, so it's 1 is 10,000 micro algos, 2 is 20,000 micro algos. I'm going to put 3, which is 30,000 micro algos. That is the price that this particular game will cost. Let's go ahead and create. Alright, so we have an internal server error where our user is. The reason why we're having this error, I did this intentionally, was because we are not yet registered, or we're not yet logged in rather. So let's go ahead and register. Remember, we tried creating one before we then applied the migration, so the registration did not fully work. Let's input our password. Okay, so we have successfully registered. So let's go into the home page. That's our default page right here. So let's go ahead and create a new. Now we have an account, so it can actually pick up our account details to get our name. I'm going to go ahead with 3 and then click on create. Alright, so we have our game. Our game has been created. You can see the mnemonic key, and then you can see the game address owner, the game name, the price, and then the game owner. Alright, you can also see the buy game options. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and log out because we do not want to buy our game ourselves. Alright, so let's go ahead and log out and create a new account with another user. Let's register. I'm going to call this Kuzu Consults 1, and then I'm going to register. Okay, our password's not much. Okay, so we have successfully created it. So let's head back here and click on buy game. If we click on this buy game, I'm expecting us to actually have an error because we do not have funds inside of this account yet. Right, so we can go to the about section and see what I'm talking about. Alright, so there's nothing here. So let's go ahead and click on the buy game to see what will happen. Okay, so sign transaction with transaction ID and exception error, algo transaction. These are all the details. They have overspent. This overspent because we do not have any amount of money and we're trying to purchase something with it, so we have an overspend. All right, let's go ahead and fund our account with the bank.testnet.algorand network. So I'm going to copy our account address. So let me go ahead and create a new game with this with this user, with this new user. I'm going to call this Need for Speed 3, and this is going to be 40,000 micro algos. All right, so I can then pick up the account address and then use the the dispenser to actually dispense micro algos into the account. All right, so let's input and then dispense funds into the account address. So we have a success message. All right, that means funds has been successfully transferred to the user. Right, then let's go back and buy this game from this Kuzu Consult user, the game owner. Right, so click on buy game. Alright, so we can see a successful message over here. Everything worked fine. And let's go back to the about. Alright, so I think we did not pass the statements, that's the view box needed into our UI. Yes, we did not. So let's go back to our home controllers and then add the view data. So we have a view data of address, act, before, and message. All right, so let's go ahead and add those. So I'm going to copy these two and paste them. I don't need this. All right, let me copy this and paste it. So we have act, that's the A. See, this is a small letter A, so I need that data passed in. I need the address also passed in, and then act. Alright, so this is all we need. So let's go back and refresh our page. So hopefully we should see we actually dispensed, yes, so we have our account balance right here. 9 1 2 3 4 5 6. These are 96 million. So let's go ahead and buy another game and see that this amount will actually drop. So initially we had about 100 million or so. Okay, then let me go ahead and purchase the game again. Alright, so our transfer was successful. Let's go to the about to check our details, our account details. Right, now we have it was successful and we have been deducted. And let's go over to let's go ahead and log out and then log in as normal Kuzu Consult user. Right, and let's go to the about section. Alright, so the transfer was successful. Remember, we did not dispense any algos into this user address, so it was what we actually bought from this user that was funded into our account. Alright, so we can go ahead and log out and log in again to ensure that yes, funds was actually added to this particular user address. So let's make one more transaction and see if this amount over here will actually change or not. Although we're expecting it to change because it's a different user. Now let's go ahead and log in. And then buy again. Alright, so our transfer was successful. Let's check the account balance and see if we were deducted. Alright, so we have our yeah, we were truly deducted. Alright, let's go back and log out and then check the other accounts to see if we were funded. Alright, so I've logged in, and let's go to the about and see the details. Yes, we were successfully funded. So this is just a short demo. You can actually customize this to your taste, the way you like it, the way you want the whole UI to look. You can beautify it even more than how it is looking at the moment. So this is just a simple presentation or a contribution from Kuzu Consult by Stephen Sunday and I. You can find Stephen Sunday. He's a blockchain ambassador, an Algorand blockchain ambassador. You can find his Twitter handle at Stephen Kusu. Right, Stephen Kusu is his Twitter handle. So this is a short presentation, a contribution from Kuzu Consult by Stephen Sunday and I to the Algorand blockchain community. Thank you.